boy! Welcome to Midnight in My Dorm Room, where tonight we're gonna be talking about vampires. Why, I hear you ask, you innocent soul cuddled in your own ignorance, unaware that locusts will swarm the land and Beelzebub will rise forth from the demon's death! Well, it's because as I was doom scrolling, I came across an advertisement, a weird one, from Disney.
You're a vampire! You can't be friends with humans! Antique chic, that's a choice. I'm not nervous!
Several questions burst forth in my mind. What is this? Who made this? Why am I being shown this? But most importantly,
how did vampires come to that? I'm not crazy, right? I mean, vampires are vampires. They're supposed to be cool and dark and edgy and evil. But now they're borderline introductory indie media. They're the stereotype of alternative. Look, as soon as Disney makes a sitcom based around your premise or idea, it's mainstream.
I'm looking at you, game shakers. Wizards of Waverly Place, what are you doing back there?
That's just how it is. I don't make the rules. Hate the game, not the player. And that's not to say they're all awful, but god damn it, they can be bland. But what led vampires to induction into the Disney sitcom Hall of Mediocrity? To answer that, the universe has called upon me, an underqualified college student with a little bit too much time on his hands. That means we start where I want, and I think we should start at the very beginning. It's fair to say the vampires as we know them in the modern culture started with Dracula by Bram Stoker. And that book is solid. But I'm an English major, so I very easily ignore when there are 100 boring pages. Which there are. But this book will go on to define a bunch of characteristics about vampires that will come to be refined in the 130 years since it was written. So let's start with the basics. Vampires in general are humanoid, at least in appearance most of the time. They do not like sunlight, not a fan of sunlight. They drink blood, and they have pretty much eternal youth, a form of immortality. They're pretty much demons, do not do well with Christianity. They can have some sort of superhuman ability over you, maybe a trance or superhuman strength. They can make other people vampires, very important. And I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, yeah, they're fucking hot! You think I'm making this up? No. Vampires are explicitly noted to be sexy, and sexuality is a major theme of this book. Jonathan Harker, he's kind of like our main character, by the way, goes out of his way to tell us in his narration that he almost couldn't resist the urge to kiss these beautiful vampire female brides. And from the female character's perspective, whew. Alright, first of all, this book was published in 1897. It doesn't really hold up to today's scrutiny. It has a lot of morals from the time that it absolutely parades, and it has a lot of Christian morals that have kind of gone out of style, so that's just something to keep in mind. However, if you choose to just blatantly ignore the intention of the author and you look purely at the text, then Dracula is so fucking sexy. He frees them from their awful husbands, and he holds them to his chest while feeding them his blood, and he puts them under a trance, under his spell, and he whisks them away to his castle where all these other beautiful women are. And given how they came at Mr. Harker, I've got to assume there's some form of like free sex going on. There's this emphasis on secular values with Dracula. Very sinful, straight to hell. So in trying to write a book about Christian values and warning against temptations of the secular variety, Bram Stoker accidentally creates this iconic figure for sexuality, and vampires become an incredible metaphor for exploring sexuality, specifically female sexuality. Well, it's a good thing that never goes anywhere. It went somewhere. I understand I'm skipping quite literally 100 years, but I'm lazy and I'll quickly fill you in on what you missed. So vampires actually became more solidified during this time, and in several cases their role as a sexual metaphor was heightened. But instead of it being used to demonize female sexuality, it just became used to explore sexuality in general. Blah blah blah. Let's talk about the greatest movies ever fucking made. Twilight is awful, but if you unironically like Twilight, that's totally fine. Kind of unrelated, but you should also probably call this number on screen. But if you've never seen the movies before, I am begging you, run, do not walk to go see these movies. They are some of the funniest movies I have ever seen in my life. However, despite how fun the movies are, they have done irreparable damage to the cool factor of vampires. I mean, making them sparkle in sunlight is just too easy to make fun of. And then, Twilight goes all in on this idea of the romantic vampire. Now, it's by no means the first media to have vampire romance within it. That honor technically goes to John William Polidori's The Vampire, written in 1819. But that's not really a romance by any stretch. Somebody just gets married to a vampire. It is a fun read though. It's short too. But in terms of romance and vampire romance as we know them now, Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire from 1976 is really the first media that explores it in a way that we recognize today. And this is where vampires are established to have the ability to be misunderstood, well-meaning, empathetic creatures, as opposed to just blood-sucking monsters. Now, what sets Twilight apart from that other media is that Twilight was fucking huge! If you weren't at least my age, you probably don't remember how big Twilight was. Because I was so young that I hardly remember. But even still, I know that it was massive. I mean, the book sold in droves. And I'm so serious when I say that Team Edward versus Team Jacob had people in tears. Teenage girls were frothing at the mouth for this content. And that is exploitable. What attracted so many teenage girls to this love story is that Edward was taboo. He was something totally different, literally inhuman, and he was so misunderstood by everybody except for the girl. And his love was so deep and genuine that even after 100+ years of life, the only person that he had feelings for was you. He was a vampire. He was cool. He was dangerous. He lived in a totally different world that your parents could never understand. Everybody in this world is cool and hip and manic pixie dream girl. It's total garbage, but it's completely understandable. It's wish fulfillment. It's the same thing as a power fantasy for a guy, but instead it's getting fawned over by hot guys for girls. And I don't blame anybody for loving this content. It's pretty much tailor-made for rebellious, spunky, not like other girls teenagers to absolutely adore. The issue is that young people become old people. And so, what used to be very counterculture, very rebellious, very cool, becomes the industry standard, becomes very safe and tame. I mean, rap went from Tupac and Biggie literally killing each other to Super Bowl halftime shows and whatever the fuck Cardi B is doing. Rock and roll went from Kiss to Kiss but with Scooby-Doo, I guess? And I mean, honestly, I would even argue weed is going down this same route. During the war on drugs, it was so hip and countercultural and cool, but now, I feel like nobody cares. For context, I do live in Colorado, so I'm a little bit biased in this front, but of my friends in university, 3 of them don't smoke weed. Now, this isn't meant to diminish those cultures. Modern rap isn't bad, weed isn't sinful, rock and roll isn't boring, but they're just not niche in the same way they used to be. It's no longer countercultural to be into those things, it's just a subsect of culture. And Twilight did the same thing, but for vampires. No longer are they this niche, mysterious metaphor for sexuality. They became, well, what I said at the start of this video. They're cool and brooding and edgy and dark, sexy monsters. And that type of a vampire was exposed to everybody through Twilight. So vampires kind of became synonymous with those traits. I mean, nobody hears vampire anymore and thinks of 30 Days of Night. They'll think of True Blood, or Vampire Diaries, or Twilight, or Monster High, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or Vampire Night. And trust me, this list goes on. And that media isn't bad at all. It's just popular. And since it's popular, a market will grow for that media. And popular culture will want to cater to that market. But it also needs to remain as safe and family-friendly as possible to reach as broad of an audience as it can. So now, we can finally talk about what inspired this video. You filthy rat! What have you done with my vampires? I mean, this is, I think, the final nail in the coffin. Vampires have gone mainstream. That's it. That's the answer to this video. What happened with vampires? Well, they went mainstream. Now, I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's worse, but it is very noticeably different. And with vampires going mainstream is really, really weird. And that's because a lot of appeal about vampires was that they were taboo. They were something that almost nobody else in the world of XYZ media knew of or approved of. But it's really quite hard to maintain that level of counterculturalism when you're literally being produced by Disney. It's just kind of hard to consume vampire media and feel that same mystique and intrigue that they want you to feel about the fact that something is vampire when we've seen vampires done 1,000 different ways because they're just so popular now. But maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I jump to conclusions. Let me watch the first episode of this with an open mind and see if it can change my mind.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
I didn't rush to shit. And it's not so much, wow, this show is horrible, but it's so much, wow, this show is as bland as an unseasoned rice cake. Now, obviously, it's a children's show. It's not made for me, but I think it is very helpful to elucidate this idea that vampires in media have been going down this very, very steady, very dangerous decline, which is kind of unique to them in that vampires are crafted with this idea of being taboo, and being countercultural is so important to vampires. But trust me, this show is not counterculturalism. It is exactly what I thought it was going to be. You've got stupid jokes.
A huge competition with some major stakes. Stakes? Can we use a different word?
You've got stupid plots.
See this? All vampire hunters wear a ring with their initials.
You've got bland characters.
I'll just cover up my glow with this sweet, sweet coat.
Safe tropes. I don't think the show's gonna be a big hit. But what do I know? The worst part is that this isn't the fault of anybody working on this show. It's the fault of Disney. Because they've been using the same formulas forever, whether it be for their sitcom or whether it be for their movies, and just trying to find new ways to spice it up and resell it to the masses. In this situation, all they're doing is trying to use vampires as a little bit of seasoning. But that's not going to work, because we've gotten to a point where vampires are no longer making media more appealing, more mysterious, more alternative. Instead, the inverse is starting to happen. Media is making vampires less mysterious, less interesting, and less alternative. So, where does that leave vampires? Vampires in media are splitting now more than ever. There isn't one universal definition for vampire like there was 100 years ago, and even 100 years ago there were still different interpretations of what a vampire was. So many different forms of media have taken this idea of a vampire to one extreme or another that we've essentially created a bunch of Darwinian evolutionary branches of this monster. Twilight's romantic vampire has become the industry standard, and it's that idea which has gone mainstream. But romantic vampires aren't the only form of vampires in media. I mean, Nosferatu last year revived the terrifying vampire. What We Do in the Shadows plays vampires very comedically to brilliant effect. And then, of course, you have Blade and Underworld, series that have this idea of an evil, monstrous vampire. But nonetheless, vampires just can't hit the same way they did 100 or even 20 years ago. They found their safest, most appealing form to as many people as possible. And that form of a vampire is what we see used time and time again in media. A vampire with its edges dulled, rounded into as safe and consumable a form for as many people as possible. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I really wanted to keep the conversation alive on this one because, in case you haven't noticed from how many different forms of vampire media I've consumed, I kind of really love vampires. That's what I get for reading the Chronicles of Vladimir Todd in middle school. Anyways, that wraps up this video for Spooktober. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next two, and maybe while you're here, check out one of my other videos. But until next time, I'm gonna go suck some blood.